Welcome to the next chapter. It is gaseous exchange in plants. Plants are autotrophs, meaning they manufacture their own food in a process called photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, carbon dioxide combines with water to produce a glucose molecule. Photosynthesis occurs during the day in the presence of sunlight. The byproduct of photosynthesis is oxygen. Some of the oxygen is utilized within the plant for respiration, while the rest is expelled out. During the night, plants do not carry out photosynthesis. However, respiration still takes place and requires oxygen. In general, plants obtain carbon dioxide from the atmosphere during the day for photosynthesis. In the process, oxygen is released. At night, plants obtain oxygen from the atmosphere for respiration. Plants then require a system of gaseous exchange in order to survive. Unicellular plants like algae have the entire cell surface in contact with the environment. They carry out gaseous exchange through simple diffusion. Multicellular plants like giant trees have a small surface area to volume ratio. Most of their cells and tissues are located far deep from the surface. Simple diffusion cannot sustain gaseous exchange in such plants. These plants have developed a complex system of gaseous exchange which ensures all tissues are served. Woody plants use stomata in the leaves and lenticels in the stem for gaseous exchange. The outermost layer of epidermis also allows for gaseous exchange to take place. In other plants like the mangroves and ficus, gaseous exchange occurs through the roots. Young stems of terrestrial plants may also carry out gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange surfaces exhibit important features that facilitate diffusion of gases. They are moist, which allows gases to dissolve before diffusing in or out. They have a large surface area for gaseous exchange. They have a thin membrane for quick and efficient diffusion. Structures of gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange occurs through stomata, spongy mesophyll, epidermis, lenticels, and roots of certain plants. Stomata. The stomata are small pores flanked by guard cells found on the surface of leaves. They are sites for gaseous exchange and transpiration. The number and distribution of stomata vary from plant to plant depending on their habitat. Plants growing in relatively dry areas have very few stomata. Most of the few present stomata are located on the lower surface of the leaf, away from direct sunshine. Now, this serves to reduce the rate of water loss via transpiration while maintaining the important process of gaseous exchange. Plants growing in areas with adequate water supply have a large number of stomata. The distribution of stomata is even in such plants. Aquatic plants have huge number of stomata, most of which are located on the upper surface to facilitate quick rate of transpiration. Mechanism of opening and closing of stomata. The guard cells control the opening and closing of stomata. Each stomata is flanked by two guard cells. The guard cells have chloroplasts, the structures that carry out photosynthesis. So they carry out photosynthesis during the day. The outer wall of the guard cells is thin and elastic. The inner wall is thicker and less elastic. During the day, light intensity is high and photosynthesis takes place in the guard cells. Glucose is made in the process and accumulates in the cell cytoplasm, thus raising the osmotic pressure of the guard cells. Water moves from the surrounding cells into the guard cells by osmosis. The guard cells increase their turgidity. The thin outer wall stretches, pulling the thicker inner wall outwards and thus opening the stomata. The turgidity is also enhanced by the entry of potassium ions into the guard cells, which are thought to influence the fixation of carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. During daytime, light causes influx of potassium ions into the guard cells, leading to carbon dioxide fixation with formation of malic acid. At night, photosynthesis ceases due to lack of sunlight. Plants respire, giving out carbon dioxide. It is important to note that respiration occurs throughout, during the day and at night. So carbon dioxide from respiration accumulates in the guard cells, and being acidic, the pH of guard cells drops. A low pH favors conversion of glucose into starch. Osmotic pressure of guard cells drops and water moves out, making the cells flaccid and the stomata close. At the same time, darkness causes potassium ions to leave the guard cells and more starch is formed. Starch, being osmotically less active than glucose, causes water to leave the guard cells, becoming flaccid. Gaseous exchange through the spongy mesophyll. The spongy mesophyll layer consists of loosely packed cells with enormous airspace between the clusters of cells. Most of the exchange occurs through the spongy mesophyll layer before exiting through the stomata or epidermis. Leaf features that favor gaseous exchange. Numerous stomata increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. The large airspace in the spongy mesophyll layer increase the surface area for gaseous exchange as well. A thin film of water surrounding the mesophyll cells allows short distance through which gases diffuse. Carbon dioxide is used in photosynthesis. In the atmosphere, carbon dioxide is at a higher concentration than inside the leaf tissue. Carbon dioxide thus diffuses into the cell. This carbon dioxide is utilized in photosynthesis by cells of the palisade layer, spongy mesophyll and guard cells. Oxygen is released in the process. Some of the oxygen is utilized in respiration and the rest diffuses out through the stomata. During respiration, oxygen is used and carbon dioxide is released. Some of the carbon dioxide is used in photosynthesis during the day and some of it diffuses out. At night, only respiration takes place. Oxygen is needed. Oxygen is at a higher concentration in the atmosphere than in the leaf tissue. It thus diffuses into the leaf via the stomata. Oxygen is used and carbon dioxide is released. But there is no photosynthesis at this time, so all the carbon dioxide has to be removed. The concentration of carbon dioxide is higher in the leaf than in the atmosphere, and therefore carbon dioxide diffuses out through the stomata. Gaseous exchange through the epidermis. The epidermis is the outermost cell layer. It is one cell thick, which reduces the distance through which diffusion occurs. Some gaseous exchange occurs through the epidermis of leaves, young stems and roots. Carbon dioxide and oxygen diffuse across the epidermal cells across a concentration gradient. The epidermis of all stems and roots peel off and cannot carry out gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange through lenticels. Woody plants have small pores called lenticels found on the back of the old stems and roots. They comprise of loosely packed cork cells that allow circulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The cells are moisturized by a thin film of water that dissolves the gases. Gaseous exchange occurs through diffusion across a concentration gradient. Gaseous exchange via roots. Plants such as ficus have roots modified for gaseous exchange. The roots have a thin epidermal layer that allows diffusion of carbon dioxide and oxygen across a concentration gradient. Next, we look at aquatic plants, and these are plants growing in water bodies. They are either emergent, submergent, or floating. Emergent plants. These plants have their roots anchored on a substance such as a rock in the water, but the rest of the body is exposed to the atmosphere. Gaseous exchange still occurs in the stomata. These plants have most of the stomata on the upper surface of the leaf. The plants also have thin walls and large air spaces called the parenchyma tissue found in the stems and leaves. These tissues store a lot of air, making the leaf and the stems buoyant. Submergent plants. In submergent plants, plant is under the water and they obtain gases from the carbon dioxide and oxygen dissolved in water. Gaseous exchange occurs through the epidermal cells. Stomata are absent in submergent plants. The leaves are generally thin with large air spaces and lack the cuticle. These plants are able to carry out photosynthesis under low concentration of air. Floating plants. Floating plants grow with their roots freely hanging in water. Gaseous exchange occurs through the stomata as in emergent plants. The roots have parenchyma cells which enable the plant to float. Gaseous exchange in plants found in marine water and estuaries. Waterlogged soils have low concentration of gases. Plants growing in such soils develop breathing roots which emerge from the soil. Gaseous exchange occurs through the epidermis. These roots are called pneumatophores.
More than 30 years of manned space travel has taught us that virtually every system in the human body is affected by the microgravity of space. Besides the issues you're probably already aware of, such as decreased muscle and bone mass, astronauts also experience circulatory problems, such as arrhythmias or abnormal heartbeats. They also suffer from anemia, a reduced number of red blood cells that carry oxygen to the tissues. And after just 2 weeks of spaceflight, 20% of returning astronauts experience difficulty standing up without getting dizzy, a condition called orthostatic intolerance. The longer they stay in zero gravity, the more pronounced are the effects. By studying the impact of virtual weightlessness on the circulatory system, scientists have learned a lot about how it functions on Earth.